It's time I made a confession. This is a safe space, right? You wouldn't judge me, would you? So I have this one opinion about the Steam Deck that I've been really hesitant, maybe even afraid to talk about because I think you're all going to think I'm delusional. In fact, I've given sort of a vague hint towards it in the past, and you guys have absolutely torn me apart in the comments. So this time I've put on my hazmat suit and now I'm prepared to get myself roasted like a bunch of gamers boycotting Modern Warfare 2. Remember that? All right, let me stop delaying the inevitable and tell you about the worst Steam Deck take that I have. Here it is. I think the Steam Deck is one step towards a possible Valve monopoly across all of gaming. Yeah, I know, it sounds ridiculous, but I think Valve already has a monopoly on PC gaming, one which we never would have expected 20 years ago when Steam was first released. And I'd say that the Steam Deck and future hardware from Valve is going to help them gain an even bigger monopoly that is going to stretch beyond what we currently think of as quote-unquote PC gaming. And I should say that I don't think Valve is being a malicious actor, and I don't think they're being anti-competitive. And when I say monopoly, I kind of just mean a de facto monopoly. I mean, I do have my complaints about Valve from time to time, but they pale in comparison to the complaints I have about AAA gaming companies and even Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. So this isn't me bitching about Valve. It's just that I see a path forward for Valve to really, truly disrupt things even more than they already have. And I think it could spell danger for some big gaming companies. So I'm going to tell you about it. Here's how I'm going to break it down. I'm going to talk about the monopoly that I believe Valve already has. I'm going to describe the trends I'm seeing in gaming right now and how it could lead to a future monopoly. And then I'm going to discuss the pros and cons of that. This video is different from what I would usually do, so definitely let me know what you think. Leave a like or a dislike and drop a comment. And also, because this is so different, I also want to leave you with something in return. So I spoke with Tomtalk, the makers of my favorite Steam Deck bag. They've decided to sponsor this video and they're making a special offer for viewers of my channel. They're offering a 10% discount on that Steam Deck bag, which I've told you so much about, and a 10% discount on their brand new slim Steam Deck case. So let me tell you about their new case and a discount, and then I'll give you the details about a potential Valve monopoly. This is the slim Steam Deck carrying case from Tomtalk, and it does everything right. It's tailor-made to fit the Steam Deck, so it's not just a switch case repurposed for the deck. That's why this is the thinnest case you're going to find for the Steam Deck, but it's not just thin. It's also durable thanks to the hard shell designed to provide protection from any bumps along the way. The hard shell is raised in all the right areas, to fit the natural curves of your deck. Not to mention, Tomtalk never skimps on quality. It has a storage slot you can use for SD cards or screen wipes, and it's got this padded bumper to avoid pressure on the shoulder buttons. And of course, it has YKK zippers, and that's why it's so fresh and so clean. Throw that all in with a 12-month warranty, and you have the best slim case on the market for the Steam Deck. And they're offering a 10% discount for my viewers on this channel using the code FANTODECK. That's for either the slim case or the Steam Deck bag, so follow the links and the instructions in the description for 10% off either of those Steam Deck accessories. Thanks to Tomtalk for sponsoring this video. All right, so let's start with the current monopoly that Valve has on PC gaming. The way I see it, their monopoly is pretty self-evident, but there are definitely people that argue that Valve doesn't have a monopoly. So let me be perfectly clear on what I mean, and you guys can agree or disagree in the comments. First, I don't mean 100% market share. They have an overwhelming amount of market share, but not 100%. Second, I do not mean they're being anti-competitive. I don't think they have to be anti-competitive to have an overwhelming amount of the PC gaming market share. What I do mean is the vast majority of people that buy games on PC do so via Steam, and thusly the vast majority of people that sell games on PC pretty much have to sell their game on Steam in order to make any reasonable return. Any efforts to sell a game outside of Steam is a lot like trying to launch something into space. Your thrust has to be out of this world in order to counteract the gravity that Steam already has. Not only that, but Steam's atmosphere is going to shed customers off of your craft's outer surface, so your rocket has to be powerful enough to withstand that too. Only the likes of League of Legends, Fortnite, and Minecraft are able to endure that sort of launch. Everyone else is forced into the Steam ecosystem. This includes Fortune 500 gaming publishers like Activision, Microsoft, and Ubisoft. They were all forced to return to the Steam ecosystem. And look, I love the Steam ecosystem as much as the next person. Cloud saves, Steam Input, Proton, Remote Play, Steam Guides, so much more. It's not a stretch to say that Valve has done more for PC gaming than any company in the last 20 years. In fact, the argument is that this is exactly why they have so much of the market share that they do. They're willing to provide a value that other store holders are simply not willing or able to provide. I'm not going to get too deep into who the competition for Steam is. I would say the most notable names are GOG, Epic, Battle.net, the Microsoft Store, and Itch.io. Epic in particular is growing incredibly fast and can serve as a counter-argument that Valve has a monopoly, but it seems like all of their user activity is predicated on them hemorrhaging money on free games and exclusives for years and years in hopes that they can get more people over to Epic, and it just doesn't seem like a sound long-term strategy if they're not also pairing that with an ecosystem that's as rich as Valve's is. In other words, it's not enough to convince me that Valve doesn't have a monopoly on PC gaming. But just because they have a monopoly on PC gaming doesn't mean they're going to have an even larger monopoly on gaming in general, right? So how did I connect those two dots? Well, it's not really two dots so much as it is two disparate paths that are quickly converging. Since the PS4 and Xbox One, consoles have been becoming more and more like PCs, and the Steam Deck represents an effort to meet them halfway with a PC that behaves a bit like a console. But it's not just the Steam Deck. Steam itself represents a 20-year effort to make PC gaming more approachable. In the early 2000s, PC gaming was like the Wild Wild West, and traditional mainstream publishers were afraid to release their games on PC for fear of piracy. Gabe Newell said piracy was a service problem, and Steam proved him right. Since that time, companies and gamers alike have been working on taking the benefits of console gaming and adding them to PC gaming. Control pads became standard, graphic settings got better defaults that were based on your hardware, people started experimenting with home theater PCs, and yes, even PC handhelds, and we've been trying to merge the best of both worlds for literal decades now. And the Steam Deck is a step forward in that progression. Not just a handheld, but an affordable handheld where there is an intended and default ideal experience. That is, playing games that perform well at a specific resolution with gamepad controls. You can still stretch the Steam Deck well beyond that experience, but the unique selling proposition of the Steam Deck is how streamlined it is when it comes to playing video games. Likewise, consoles have been becoming more and more like PCs. It's not just that Microsoft and Sony consoles are x86 based, which I do think is an important factor, but stretching as far back to around the same time that Steam was being born, consoles started to embrace hard drives and installing games on them. And now we're at the point where the disc only serves as a license. Consoles began to target different power profiles, as in the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, or the Series S and the Series X. So now developers have to account for two different SKUs. And that kind of leads to the corollary of these console games now having settings that allow for different performance profiles. Do you want to play fidelity mode or the performance mode? This all leads to console gaming acquiring some of the same benefits that PC gaming has, like improved backwards compatibility and greater player choice, but it also leads to some of the same cons, like the inevitable death of physical copies of games. Beyond that, it's actually resulted in better interoperability between PC gaming and console gaming. You see that with ports between platforms, which have become a lot easier, but you also see that with brands like PlayStation supporting their controllers on PC with their very own drivers. So the lines between console gaming and PC gaming are blurring. Assuming you even agree with that premise, you must now be asking me, how does that possibly lead to a monopoly from Valve? Well, here's how I see it. Increasingly, Microsoft is becoming less and less concerned with their actual hardware. Their motivation is to move folks towards a subscription with Game Pass, and the hardware you choose to play Game Pass on is not particularly important to them. Whether it's an Xbox or a PC or a phone, a TV, or something else, they really don't care. Sony doesn't seem quite as focused as Microsoft when it comes to moving folks towards a subscription, but I suspect that's just because they're a couple of steps behind Microsoft. I believe that Sony too will become more engrossed with getting users into their subscription model, but being Sony, it's likely that they'll continue to care at least a little bit about hardware. Think about how they're handling first-party releases right now. They've already stated that they have no intentions to do day-and-date releases to PS Now, which is in contrast to how Microsoft handles its first-party titles on Game Pass. Nonetheless, Sony has become gradually more platform agnostic. PS Now and Remote Play are not tied to Sony-only devices, and PC ports of Sony games are becoming more common and more timely. By the way, I haven't mentioned Nintendo because I think Nintendo are the outliers here. I can't even begin to predict what they're going to do, and I don't want to try. So I'm going to continue to exclude Nintendo from this conversation and assume that Nintendo is going to figure out whatever works best for them. But the point is, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Sony and Microsoft are going to be increasingly platform agnostic and increasingly subscription focused. So just like Netflix transitioning from DVD only to DVD and digital to eventually digital only, I believe Microsoft and Sony are going to disincentivize buying games and incentivize subscribing to their platform. This is the point in the future where we would hit an important crossroads. Will gamers by and large flock towards a subscription model? Or is there a company that can provide them an attractive alternative? If you believe that games are just like movies and TV shows and that gamers will be fine with a subscription model, then yeah, that doesn't leave an open lane for Valve to grow even faster than it already is. But personally, I have two beliefs. Number one, the genie's already out of the bottle. We live in a post-Netflix world and we know what it's like to give up ownership of our media. So the first thing here is that we're simply just more aware of the consequences of a subscription model. Number two, I think the differences between games and TV or film are fairly stark. We typically cannot finish a game in a single sitting, and some of us will get really deep into a single game. So the value proposition of a TV subscription looks a lot different than the value proposition of a game subscription. Of course, Game Pass is a great value today, but over time the subscription will get more expensive and the selection will become more limited. This is where I think Steam becomes the sensible alternative for a lot of people. It's going to more closely resemble traditional console experience than the subscription models that Microsoft and Sony will be pushing, and I believe that's exactly what people will be looking for. And trust me, I know that even after all that theory crafting, it still sounds far-fetched. This is my worst Steam Deck take after all. And to be fair, I skipped a couple of steps. For example, I think this involves Valve releasing a modern set-top Steam box, which I consider to be an inevitability. But either way, I predict that Microsoft and Sony are going to leave a lane for Valve to push their way in to a market that has traditionally been satisfied by Xboxes and PlayStations. And given that small room, I'm bullish on Valve overtaking that space the way they've overtaken and basically become synonymous with PC gaming. Which brings us to the question of whether or not this is a good thing. I think those of us that have become Steam stalwarts over the years hold two opposing positions. On the one hand, we're intrinsically aware that monopolies are bad and we know the consequences of a market without competition. On the other hand, no Steam, no buy, right? So yeah, monopolies suck, but if we had to choose one company to have a monopoly, it would probably be Valve. But if there's one thing I know for sure is that even if you do feel this way, Valve won't always be Valve. One day, ownership of Valve will transfer from Gabe Newell to someone else. What happens from there? What happens to our libraries? I know Gabe has promised a way for us to keep our libraries, but have they already made preparations for that? How come we don't know what shape that will take? What happens if new ownership decides on more draconian DRM or moves to a subscription model? I know that I'm talking possibly decades into the future, but I'm also looking back on the decade since Steam was born. 2003 to 2023 has seen changes like we could never imagine. Likewise, 2023 to 2043 could have some serious game changers in store for us too. And look, I also know that some of you have backlogs as large as I do and have joked about playing all these games when you retire. Jokes or not, we care about games preservation and we like having choices. So personally speaking, I'd rather not see a monopoly, even if it is Valve. All right, thanks for sticking with me on my worst Steam Deck take. I hope that it's at least been entertaining, right? Like at least I gave you some science fiction or something. Either way, let me know what you think of my take here. Go ahead and be ruthless. I'm now emotionally prepared to get torn apart in the comments, so just go for it. All right, Deck Gang out. Goodbye.